Today is October 20th. It's 14:15. I'm out in the countryside of Wisconsin and looking at all these cattle grazing a pasture. Mostly dairy cattle, Guernseys, and there's a few Black Angus here and there. And they're grazing on these beautiful green pastures, and I started to think a little bit about some things that I know about grazing animals, and it got me to thinking about this nonsense with climate change. And I just saw a video clip a few days ago of some woman asking Kamala Harris at some town hall event about doing something about eating meat to help climate change. That is the biggest line of bullshit you will ever hear. And of course, she says, well, I'm open to changing America's eating habits. Basically what she's saying is that they want to tax meat. That's what they're going to do. They're going to put a carbon tax on meat. So every time you want a steak, you got to pay extra for the steak because of climate change. I want to explain something to people who don't understand how this works. Cattle, the whole family, the bovine family, are ruminants. If you don't know what a ruminant is, ruminant is a grazing animal that has a special digestive process where they can get every single ounce of cellulose broken down out of a plant to make glucose. All our bodies, our cells on a cellular level run on glucose. Your body can convert proteins, and it can convert plants, complex carbohydrates and fats into glucose. It uses protein to replace protein that dies, but push comes to shove, your body can make glucose out of protein. Our cells, every cell in our body only runs on glucose, which is a simple 6-carbon sugar molecule. That's how life is on a cellular level. Okay, and we as a species, as human beings, cannot digest cellulose. We call it fiber. Grazing animals, you have two types. You have ruminants, and they have a special digestive system, very large gut. That's why cattle are so wide. That's why goats are so wide. They can digest. Well, let me explain it this way. Grass is a very nutrient-poor plant, but it's extremely abundant across the globe. And it is amazingly durable. It can survive fires. It can survive droughts. It can survive heavy grazing. It can survive trampling. Grass in all its forms, particularly perennial grass, like the grass you grow on your lawn. It's extremely durable. It can go dormant for months. In some places, grass species go dormant for years and wait for rain and spring up in a day of rain. So a lot of animals have adapted to exploiting this as food, but they have to digest it. The digestive system between a horse and a cow is completely different. Horses have to eat continually to get the same type of nutrients out of it that a cattle do, but cattle can sit down, relax, chew their cud. That's how they do it. They basically throw up what they've eaten, and it's been digested, what they previously chewed, digested, and then they chew it again, break it down mechanically more, and then they swallow it again, and it goes through another process in their digestive system where their gut bacteria helps break the cellulose down so they can get nutrients out of it. If you ever look at the shit between a horse and a cow, it's completely different. There's a reason for it, because cattle are able to digest it completely. That's why dried horse crap looks more like dried lawn clippings when you break it up. Cattle shit doesn't look like that. And here's the case I'm trying to make. Throughout the millennia, there were thousands upon thousands upon thousands of grazing animals on this globe. A lot more than there is now. When our population was small, the world was filled with grazing animals. Most of them are gone now. The vast herds of buffalo that populated the West are gone. There were more before human beings were in North America. The mammoths ate grass. There were all kinds of species of grazers that ate grass. But there were a lot of predators that ate them. So here we are in 2020, and you have people worrying about, because the cattle are putting out methane as part of their digestive process. There are less, I am willing to wager, there are less grazing animals putting out methane in this time in the globe than there was 4,000 years ago. Oh, but we have all the industry and all this, so we're going to tackle it with cattle. It's all bullshit. It's all bullshit. Look, you raise cattle till they're about 2 years old. They go to market in 2 years, so they're only 2 years old when they're being slaughtered. In the wild, grazing animals, I don't know what their lifespan is, but typically I don't think they made it real far, considering how many predators were around and you had disease and so on and so forth. They would reproduce quickly. They would mature sexually a lot earlier, and just to keep their numbers high, because they're a prey species. And prey species are always more abundant, number-wise, than the predators to feed on them. That's predator-prey relationship 101. The point I'm trying to make is very simple. Grass grows in hostile environment, just about any environment you can think of, but they are good at growing in dry areas. You have vast regions of this world where you can't grow cereal grains, you can't grow crops to store anything. You need rain to produce the fruit of a plant, whether it's a nut, whether it's a seed, what it is. You need rain. Grass, all the power that's in grass is in its roots, and the roots can go deep and they can survive fires, and it's crazy. But it's nutrient poor. If you go into the American West, you start to go west in the United States, west of the Mississippi River, it becomes drier. But there's still grasslands, and you could raise cattle. Otherwise, you can't grow anything on it. So what is a wise use of land that's not doing anything, that's filled with grass? You raise cattle that you sell for food. Here's another thing. Particularly in poor nations that can't grow crops like that, because most of them are in arid areas and so on and so forth, but they got grasslands. They can raise cattle and goats. And then, because they don't have the transportation, because they're poor or their country lacks the infrastructure, you can walk the product to the market. You don't have to drive a truck to a jungle on unpaved roads and load up the product. You can't go and load soybeans in the jungle. You've got to get your product to market. So you can walk cattle. We used to have cattle drives in this country over 100 years ago, where you raised, the cattle were wild out on the plains. You drove them by horseback up to where the railroads were and loaded up on railroads to transport them out of there. Good portion of the third world still does this. So if you think you're going to change the world by being vegan, you're full of shit. It's fantasy land, because you have no idea how any of this stuff works. Because you're not learning it in school, and nobody's teaching you the truth. That's really what it comes down to. My point is real simple. Proper use of resources. Proper use of resources is using land that is unproductive for any type of agriculture. You can raise animals on it. You can raise cattle. And the reason cattle need a lot of space. So the reason people raise cattle, and historically, no matter what time you go back, when you start to look at times when people domesticated cattle were wealth. Cattle brought wealth to a family or brought wealth to a nation because you need a lot of land for cattle. Ever been to Scotland? Just acres and acres and miles of grasslands, of grass, because it's wet all the time. And it's wet. You can raise cattle. You can raise sheep. You can raise livestock. Because it's cold, very few, a lot of people don't realize it. In order to grow corn needs heat. Corn needs heat and it needs rain. And there's only a few areas in the world where you can grow corn in such mass quantities. Argentina, the Midwest United States, Ukraine, parts of Canada. It's the only place where you can really grow corn like you can grow it here. Just acres and acres and miles and miles and miles of it. Because the climate's got to be a certain way for that. When it comes down to it, don't believe the crap that's coming from the left, that's coming from Democrats, that just because they spit this out, because you don't investigate the facts of how this really works, don't believe this. Climate change is just a giant tax scheme. It's a giant tax scheme for developed nations, because they're not going to do it to third world nations, and they sure the hell ain't going to do it to China. It's just a giant tax scheme to get more money out of you under the guise that we're all going to go extinct because the world's going to get warmer. And I have met a lot of bubbleheads who think man-made climate change, we're all going to go extinct because I believe the scientists. They don't know anything about science. None of those people that tell you they believe the scientists, they know nothing about science. And there could be some stranger that passes himself off as a scientist, and they'll believe him. They'll never look at the guy's credentials, and they'll never look at the person's critics, and they will never look at the other side of the coin, because for every scientist that said this is true, there's another one that says it's not. Historically, that has always been true. And typically, the ones who think they are right now eventually get proven to be wrong in the future. Historically, that has always been the case. The people that they shun and say are crazy now are usually the ones that are right down the line. There is a thing called scientific dogma. If it's not worse than religion. In a way, it is a religion. It's scientific dogma with their own tenets. And anything that changes their tenets can't exist, and you get labeled and you get blacklisted. And that's what happens in climate change. Eat meat. Eat as much of it as you want. I'm going to tell you this too. You are better off eating red meat and high protein than you are all the other nonsense that a modern Western diet has pushed on you. Because the truth be told, human beings have only more or less domesticated just about everything you see in less than about 10,000 years. So if you believe science and you believe evolution, we should all be eating a hunting-gathering diet. We shouldn't be eating hardly any carbohydrates. It should all be high protein, high fiber. And really, that's really what our diet should consist of for the most part. Because when human beings ate fruit, they ate fruit that was in season, because fruit only comes at a specific time of year. Usually in the fall after the growing season. So when our ancestors were eating fruit, they were eating it at the end of the season. They were picking berries, and they're picking fruit off a tree because it came at the end of the season. They were eating these things seasonally. The rest of the year, it's protein and maybe carbohydrates in the form of various root various roots that they knew were edible. That's it. That's it. So if you believe the science, eat more meat. And tell the vegans and the climate change activists that are really trying to tax scam you to go pound sand.